This wasn't really a planned video, but I'm interested in the issues involved and I think it's very important. So I want to discuss it. This is the headline from, I believe it's the Sydney Morning Herald. I'll just double check that. Excuse me, ABC News. It's an Australian news network, I understand. And this is the headline: China's soft power. Julie Bishop steps up warning to university students on Communist Party rhetoric. Now, I'm going to read out a bit of this so you get the context, but I will include a link as well. Foreign Minister Julie Bishop has issued a blunt warning to Chinese university students affiliated with the Communist Party, urging them to respect freedom of speech in Australia. There are mounting anxieties about the way the Chinese government uses student groups to monitor Chinese students in Australia and to challenge academics whose views do not align with Beijing's. Australia's security agencies are now pushing allies, including the US, the UK, Canada, and New Zealand, to hammer out a collective strategy to resist Chinese government intrusions into Western universities. Ms. Bishop said Australia welcomed international students, but added that people came to study in Australia because of its openness and freedom. This country prides itself on values of openness and upholding freedom of speech, and if people want to come to Australia, they are our laws, Ms. Bishop said. That's who we are, and that's what they should abide by. Earlier this year, a Four Corners investigation revealed the extent of influence by the Chinese Communist Party on international students studying in Australia. I'm not familiar with what Four Corners is. The issue came into sharp focus earlier this month after the head of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Francis Adamson, warned Australian universities they need to be resilient to foreign interference. The Foreign Minister backed Ms Adamson's comments and said freedom of speech was crucial. We want to ensure that everyone has the advantage of expressing their views, whether they are at university or whether they are visitors, Ms Bishop said. We don't want to see freedom of speech curbed in any way involving foreign students or foreign academics. One of the most senior national security figures in Australia says there is now like-mindedness and shared understanding among Five Eyes allies, that's five Anglophile countries sharing intelligence information, of how China's influence has penetrated universities. And Australia's intelligence and diplomatic organisations are increasingly concerned about the way the Chinese government uses student groups to push its agenda. Australia is giving China what it wants in terms of education for its students, so it's high time for the federal government to insist the Chinese comply with Australia's values and interests, one senior foreign diplomatic figure told the ABC. Okay, I think this is very refreshing. Refreshing because this is a Western government that is finally starting to be assertive on this issue. I have long felt strongly that this has been going on, and there's been countless examples of it, going back at least to the Beijing Olympics in 2008. That was very, very prominent then, and obviously the situation then was very tense when you had these national students advocating for Beijing, and you had, anti-Beijing protesters. I believe that since then there's been many other examples of the Chinese government trying to encourage overseas students to promote a nationalistic sort of narrative and defend them no matter what, defend the Communist Party no matter what. And this is a country whereby people are basically instigated to love the Communist Party from an early age. So I do think that this is refreshing. I commend Australia for this. I think it is a good thing. And I really, really, really hope that our government has some sense and follows heed. Now, to be clear here, I'm very closely connected with the Chinese community. At least half of my friends are Chinese. And I feel like I'm not coming from certain sort of outside perspective. I know Chinese people very well. I've been to the country. I've interacted with Chinese people for years. So I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea and think this is some sort of xenophobia. That's not the issue here. The issue is that there is a very real security situation going on here with the Chinese government interfering in Western countries. The irony, of course, is that Beijing is always whinging and complaining about whenever foreign journalists ask them questions about human rights. They're always complaining about Western interference. Well, it's time we turned this around and said, wait a second, you're interfering in our affairs by trying to influence your overseas students to bully and harass students who don't fit into Beijing's line of thinking. So Chinese students who maybe don't agree with Beijing or critics of Beijing will find themselves bullied by national students for their opinions. And if you think I'm exaggerating, look at the case of the Duke University student. It's quite a while back now, but I think it's still valid because these sort of things are ongoing. She was a Chinese student, okay, and her only crime was to try and negotiate between the two rival sides, the national students and the anti-Beijing demonstrators. What happened? A bunch of nationalist little bullies decided to harass her and harass her family back in China simply because she had advocated that both sides, show reason. That's the sort of thuggery that we are talking about. And I know that not every student behaves like this. Don't get me wrong. I have met many Chinese students who are very open minded, very respectful, very tolerant of the host country that they're in. And we shouldn't assume that, every single Chinese student is some sort of communist spy. That would be ridiculous. But by the same token, this is a real phenomenon. And it's been going on now for years. And I believe what the Communist Party doing is taking advantage of our tolerance and using it against us, using it to try and stir up their ultra nationalist agenda. No way would Western students have this same sort of flexibility in China. Say, for example, I supported a particular British political party. I couldn't go to China and say this party is better than the others and try to encourage British overseas students to support that party. It would be unthinkable. They would tell me where to go, and rightly so. They would say, I'm here to work, I'm not here to, support the Conservative Party or the Labour Party or whatever. So I commend Julie Bishop and the Australian government for taking the initiative here, and I really, really hope that we do likewise. I do think it's important that we welcome Chinese students. It's important for our economy. We have world class universities, and particularly in this Brexit era, that is very, very important. But we have to be equally assertive in maintaining our national values. Freedom of speech doesn't mean taking advantage of the tolerance that we show to bully other students and to try to promote an aggressive communist agenda. It's not welcome here, and we need to make that abundantly clear. Personally, I think that when Chinese students get their visa, it should be a case of, look, you're welcome here. We hope you have a good time. We want you to have a good experience, but understand that you're not in China now, and we're not going to tolerate any sort of attempts to promote a communist agenda and promote Xi Jinping's aggressive nationalist agenda. It should be absolutely resisted. This is soft power because most of it is non-violent, like most of it, 99%, but occasionally it does get ugly, and we need to be absolutely clear. I have to be honest when I say not just Chinese students, but any nationals from another country using the tolerance that we show to promote a nationalist rhetoric, especially against a host nation. Quite bluntly, it pisses me right off because Westerners would not have that sort of flexibility in China. If you're Chinese, don't get me wrong, I'm not anti Chinese. I'm not saying I'm not trying to vilify the Chinese people. I'm not saying that every Chinese person who comes to the West is like this. I know there are many people who come just for holiday or for business or for study. But the fact of the matter is, the Communist Party has infiltrated the West, and there's been clear signs of this, and we need to stand up to it. So I commend Australia. I think this is a good thing, and I really, really hope that we follow suit. As for Chinese students, if you are doing this, if you are being paid by the Communist Party, if you are knowingly pushing their agenda, I would just say this: you're entitled to your opinion. What you're not entitled to do is bully other students or to try and interfere in this. And like I say, this isn't just about students. There has been examples of Beijing trying to push its communist ideology in so-called Sino-Western joint programs, particularly at university level. Universities need to get a grip on this because it isn't just the responsibility of governments. Universities, chancellors, the boards of universities need to get a grip on this. And I'm more concerned actually about them than I am about governments. I think governments might take the initiative, but universities are so hell bent on virtue signaling that they would say, oh no, it's racist to say this, which is a lot of nonsense. This is a real phenomenon and we need to be assertive. I'll put a link under this video.